and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Extend your life with Extendovite. When your doctor tells you you have bad cholesterol or blockages in the arteries, what do? When diet and exercise is not enough, we try medications and hope for the best. For the last 2 decades, I have been telling people about a natural method to help solve these problems and more. Extendovite can help maintain cardiovascular health and lower blood lipid levels in adults. The 7 herbs in Extendovite are known to work together synergistically to get the results we hope for. There are many testimonials on Extendovite's effect on circulatory-related ailments. Get Extendovite today to start your journey back to a healthier life. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or see us on amazon.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin. Check.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And we are on Revolution Radio, and our producer is Thomas Becker. And today, our special guest is Adam Apollo. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Adam before I bring him on and bring on Dr. Lessin. So Adam Apollo has offered insights on global transitions, exopolitics, physics, technology, human spirituality, and our interstellar future as a leadership ambassador at the White House, in multiple summits at the United Nations, and at conferences and festivals around the world. So we're going to talk about a lot of things like contact experiences and knowledge of our galactic family and Contact in the Desert, which is coming up in, I guess, 2 weeks or next weekend. Yeah, really soon here. And I have a longer bio on Adam on AquarianRadio.com, and I invite you to go over there. And I've got some pictures, and I'm going to add some more, and some links, and more information on his talks at Contact in the Desert coming up in the next 2 weeks. Dr. Lessin, Dr. Sasha, how are you? How's your mic going? Are you there? Sound check.
I'm fine. Adam, the first one I really want to hear first about what are you going to be, what's hottest? What are you going to be presenting? What are your workshops and panel things? What are you going to be doing at Contact in the Desert? So I hope to hear some of that.
Let's talk about that. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. I want to get more. It's ladies' choice, okay? I want to know more about Adam. Who are you? How did you get started in this? And what are your contact experiences? I want a little bit of background. Then we'll wrap up the second hour with what you're going to be teaching. So welcome to our show, Adam Apollo. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where were you born and raised? And how did you get into consciousness, spirituality, and extraterrestrial contact?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here on your show, and happy to tell a little bit of my background and my story. My parents divorced when I was 2 years old, so I traveled a lot as a little kid. I was between northern New Mexico and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and Austin, Texas. Spent some time around Philadelphia, little time around St. Louis, and a lot of time on the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii when my dad moved out there when I was around 11, and western North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains, beautiful Appalachian. And that's where, when I was about 15, I woke up, so to speak. And that happened through an experience where I had a really good best friend, and we used to philosophize about the universe and ask the really hard questions. And we'd come to certain questions like, how is it that you can feel it when someone's looking at you from across the room? And why is it that we think of somebody and then all of a sudden the phone rings and it happens to be them? Like, what is the actual physical mechanism for these things happening? And it was through a deep dive into the exploration of what that's about that I discovered that I had a human energy field. And at the time, I'd never heard anything about the human energy field or that there was a field around the body. And, as a 15-year-old kid, it was like finding the Force in Star Wars, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can feel a vibrational, tangible, tactile field between my hands. I wonder if other people can feel it. And I started experimenting in high school with, taking a random friend and basically building an energy ball in my hands or a stream between my fingers. And I'd tell them to stick out their hand, and I would just move that space around their hand, usually with several feet away from my hands to theirs. And their jaws would drop and their eyes would bug out, and they're like, oh my God, what is that? No one's ever taught us that. It's not in our schools. It's not, it's not in our general traditions. It's not taught in religions, that we have this field around us. And so I became a very avid researcher as a high school kid. And I dove deep into the study of ancient cultures and discovered words like chi and ki from Oriental traditions, prana from India, odic force, based on the Nordic traditions, vital energy, Iliaster, all of these names, for this vital field that surrounds us and interpenetrates the universe and is this ether that so many of the Greek and Roman philosophers talked about for hundreds of years. And then I was wondering, why don't we have this study in our schools? Why don't we learn this in kindergarten? This seems so fundamental to everything that we experience as human beings. And so I dove deep into the study of physics, and that led me down a road of studying loop quantum gravity, quantum mechanics, special and general relativity, string theories, and also discovering that in the history of physics, this sort of vital essence in ether was very, very present until the late 1800s and early 1900s, where the sort of last vestiges of the luminous essence of the luminiferous ether, as they used to call it, were eradicated from our science. And that happened partially through Einstein's work, and it's something that you'll never learn about in school, but if you do your own research, you'll find that Einstein, knew there was an ether. He wrote special relativity, which basically knocked it out of the park of science, and all the other scientists were like, oh, finally, we can get rid of the ether. That connects science to religion and spirituality, so we can have it to ourselves. But only a few years later, Einstein starts developing the theory of general relativity, which describes space-time as a fabric, as a fluid that bends light. And his teacher, Lorentz, was Einstein, you just proved the ether exists, don't you? And he's like, well, yes, you're right, I did, and He basically does a whole paper and a series of interviews about the ether and its essential importance in general relativity, but it's completely ignored by the entire scientific community and still is to this day. Even with the Higgs field, the Higgs boson, all this stuff, the God particle, which Einstein and the ether was already talking about, 100 years ago. So it's fascinating times in these transitions of science and spirituality. And for me, I got started on that journey very, very early on, exploring the depths of the fabric of the universe itself and what it's made of and what geometries are related to it and why do we know certain things and not know other things. So that's a little bit of where I got started.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like the ether information got incorporated into the New Age spirituality and consciousness movement, but it's still there. It's conceptually, but it's been changed and invalidated and kind of removed from the scientific realm.
That's
what do you
right.
think, Sasha? You there, Sasha?
Yeah, I just turned my mic off. I'm fascinated. Go on.
So anyway, so you have this awareness and you go into studies. A lot of us do that. It's like we want to know more. It's not offered in schools. Where do we go? Looking alternatives for the information. Thank God now we have the internet. I don't know when your quest was started. I'm much older than you, obviously, but now we can go to the internet. But that's kind of it's big and yet it's getting more and more controlled. So information is always being controlled by somebody who doesn't want us to know what we need to know to really get it. So what happened with your contact experiences? Who did you have contact? When did it begin? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. When I was very little, I had my first starship experience, and I didn't remember much about the experience initially. I was out at night and I was walking around this pond at this ranch where my mom worked with these horses. And I went outside because it was a beautiful night and just wanted to be under the stars and by the pond. And all of a sudden this giant light comes over the mountain and it just blinds me. It's so bright and so big and completely silent and just blinds me. And then the next thing I know, it shoots off and disappears over the mountain. And I went inside. I was like, Mom, I saw this thing. World? This was in northern New Mexico.
What part of the world? And in around what year?
Yeah, this was northern New Mexico, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains near Red River.
Right. Around what year?
This was when I was maybe 6, so this would have been 1988 or so, 1987.
Okay. 87 or 88. Okay. I'm just getting a timeline here.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So that was my first.
So you go inside. And you say, Mom.
Tell my mom, I'm like, Mom, I saw this thing. She's like, wow, okay. I don't know what that was. And I was like, okay. That's so weird. It was this big thing. And I remember in the days after thinking back and I was like, was that a dream? I mean, it was just such a crazy thing. But it stuck with me, but I never understood it for a long time. And then when I was a teenager and my dad was living outside of St. Louis, I was driving home with him and my stepbrother. My stepbrother is like, stop the car. And we're on this old dirt road, all the trees kind of going down in this valley down to a river. And the sky is wide open. And my dad stops the car and we're looking out the window. And sure enough, we see these 3 lights. He's like, get out of the car. We jump out, and it's these 3 lights in a triangle, and they're rotating and just flowing back and forth across the sky, kind of weaving in a dance towards the horizon. And we were all just stunned. I mean, it was like obviously not an aircraft, obviously not a helicopter, obviously nothing that we know of that there's any technology of on Earth. And that also stuck with me. Through until I was entering college at the University of North Carolina in Asheville, and I met a gentleman who had just come down from Washington, D.C., and he had been at the National Press Club while Stephen Greer, who was also from Asheville, was doing a presentation with a whole series of individuals from CIA, NSA, FBI, NASA, former astronauts, the former head counsel of the Iran-Contra hearings, the advisor to Wernher von Braun, and they were all doing this major disclosure event in D.C., and he had a videotape of it, and he said, Stephen's coming down in a couple weeks, man, you should come and meet him and come, check it out. And so that's how I found out about the Disclosure Project, and that for me was kind of like...
Which one was that? Is that the 2001 or the 2000, I forget, 2008 or something? What was the first one?
This was in 2001.
Yeah? Yeah, 2001. So you're talking about the 2001.
Yep, the first big National Press Conference meeting. And that gave me some of the kind of like scientific and logical backing to things that I had already ascertained. Like from a scientist's perspective, if you understand the scale of the universe and the scale of even our galaxy, and even at that time, at that time we thought maybe 10% of stars have planets, and maybe 100th of those have planets that can support life. That was in, 2001, 2002. And I knew just from that calculation, with 200 billion stars, there had to be species out there. But after, now we know that 99% of planets have stars, and over 50% of those have planets that are, or more, have planets that are in the so-called Goldilocks zone. So that equation has changed dramatically over these many years. But it wasn't until 2005 that I had an experience out in the middle of the desert in northern Nevada. And in that experience, I went through a massive personal healing where I cleared some pretty deep personal wounds and karma with my mother and father from my first lifetime on this planet. And that lifetime was in the time that most people call Atlantis. And it was during the Ice Age, and it was just prior to the end of the last Ice Age. And I experienced the end of the last Ice Age and the planetary shifts that occurred at that time and the floods. And I met my mother and father from that time and had to work out some pretty deep stuff with them. And this was in a time of my life where I was having very powerful, spontaneous recall experiences with a variety of people in my life who I had shared experiences with in other times and other places. And many of these experiences...
So you're saying you met your mother and father from your Atlantis lifetime during the Earth changes. How did you know they were your mother and father? What gave you that?
Instantaneous.
What made you realize that?
Instantaneous mutual recall.
And they knew as well.
Yes. And in my father,
how was that? Was that a good connection or a bad connection?
Well, with both. Let me ask you a question. Is your connection with your mother a good connection or a bad connection? I mean, when
you don't want to talk about my mother.
Like we have many dynamics to our connections, right? And in this case, as with most relationships, there were some really beautiful aspects of our connection, and there was also some pain and some things that we had to work out. And somehow had still not worked that out over the past 13,000 years and with other lives and things going on. And I finally got down to the root of where some of that pain and the traumas around that time really were in my being. And when I was able to finally release that and clear that out of me, it accompanied a massive deluge of understanding and memory from before I came to this earth. And I remembered very, very clearly being in a dual sun system on a planet that had massive, massive trees and living in tree cities. And I also remembered coming to earth and choosing to grow up in a forest and live with peoples that were, in a sense, hybrids of my people from this dual sun system and humans here on earth. And we were bringing our culture to this planet and our honoring of the plants and our knowledge of the tree songs and many sort of traditions and qualities that some people in this time might call elven, thanks to the work of J.R.R. Tolkien, who was not just an author, he was a linguist, and he was trying to create a language from scratch. And in the process of so-called creating this language, he began having visions and downloads of a people from a land of eternal sun who had crossed the great seas and come to Middle Earth. And that people was the elven people. And in J.R.R. Tolkien's own words, he always said, you know, I'm not making up stories. I'm trying to translate a history that I received through these languages. And that's what he did. And so I had already had a deep connection to this sort of elven energy and to the people in Tolkien's work, and had read many other fantasy books about elves and all of these things. But this was a very, very direct and visceral memory of myself, and choosing to come to this planet and being aware of many other species. And I decided at that point that I was going to go out into the middle of the desert and I was going to make contact. Because now that I know that I'm a star being, that seems like that should totally be possible. I know they can hear me. Like, I know that we had the technology to pick up telepathic transmissions. I know that this is possible. And so I did. I went out into the middle of the desert, basically went through a process in which I sort of initiated a series of protocols where I was reaching out to the galactic community and saying, you know, I'm here, we're here, we want to connect with you, I want to make contact with you. And that resulted in basically a physical star being coming down, and I met with her and spoke with her telepathically and had one of the most incredible, visceral, telepathic conversations I've ever had in all of my, at least all my lives here on Earth.
Now, were you alone when you made contact with her?
I was in an area where there was other people around, and there was, in fact, a couple guys who were out here in the desert too, and they were kind of like rednecks, and they were exploring this space of this art piece that I was around at the time that I was working on making this contact. And they saw her when she showed up out of nowhere. And when they looked over at her, they were like, "Oh my God, man, what the heck is going on in here?" And we're like completely freaked out. And they're, you know, and they're kind of drunk or something, and who knows. And so for me, it was an amazing anchoring experience, because when you suddenly see someone, you know, standing there in front of you who's wearing this like incredible robes with glowing symbols going all the way down the edges of her robes, and a face very similar to a human's, except where her eyebrow bones, you know, we're all humans, all Homo erectus. You look at our eyebrow bones, they go down to, you know, this corner here at the edge of your eye. And instead of being an end point there, hers was hollowed out back to like about where your temple is. And her literal bone structure of her face was different. And she had these little bone points in her forehead and on her cheeks. And I mean, you absolutely could not duplicate that. Like, even if you had a human skeleton, you'd have to build, you know, all these layers on top of it, and then your whole face is going to be kind of much more extended and distorted. And in her case, it was actually the structure of her skull was just different.
Have you ever seen an image that resembled her, or been able to get an artist to draw it for you? Have you ever seen anything that closely resembled her?
Yeah.
Those alien pictures people have?
I would say that the closest thing that I've seen are the Romulans in Star Trek. They look kind of like Vulcans, kind of elvenish or whatever, but they have these little ridges on their foreheads, kind of like a Klingon or something. but much more subtle than that. Hers were very, very subtle, and she was very, very beautiful. And when she looked at me, she transmitted to me, "I know who you are." And it hit me like somebody had just put VR goggles on me. And I was suddenly like in this massive chamber, and there was all of these species in this massive council chamber, like something out of a newer Star Wars movie, which, you know, hadn't even come out till after this. And then like I was like docking with a massive mothership, and then I was like looking down at this planet, and then I was like looking up from the Earth inside of a stone circle, and there was a massive ship above me. And, you know, this was like Avalonian times. There was all of these moments where I had some connection with her personally across these different lifetimes. And I was just suddenly shown all of that experience, you know, in a matter of seconds, just like bam, along with this symbol, which I had been drawing since high school, which is a pentagram, hexagram, heptagram, 5, 6, 7 linked together. And was connected to all of my unified physics work, which, you know, eventually I became aware that a lot of the unified physics and harmonics work and starship studies and all of my knowledge in that space was actually knowledge that I brought to this planet. It's not just knowledge that I just thought of as a teenager.
Right.
So, this was the beginning of some very, very deep integration for me. And she was very clear that not all humans are ready, and showed me kind of images of war and violence and pain. And I acknowledged that, and I also acknowledged to her that I see that, and I also see transformation happening. I see great change happening in the world, and there's all these people who I believe are ready for this next level that we're going to become part of this galactic community. And she was very moved by my answer, and it felt like I passed a test of some kind. And she bowed to me and sent me this wave of love that literally just took my breath away. It was like getting hit in the chest with a blast of energy. And just breathed in, and I bowed very, very low to her, and I was so thankful that she had showed up and that I'd had this moment. And I came up from that bow, and she was completely gone.
Oh, wow.
Just gone.
Oh, just
nowhere.
Gone. Now, do you have was she somehow connected to you, like in the form of a mate or a romantic partner?
No.
Of your time with her?
No, I didn't feel that so much with her. I felt more like familial, like a sisterhood, you know?
Like a sisterhood. Okay.
Yeah, like.
Did she have hair?
Yeah, long, beautiful hair, but mostly kind of hidden in this cowl of these robes that she was wearing.
Do you know what color her hair was, or her eyes?
Well, it was darker, and so it's hard to say what the color of her eyes were. They were lighter colored, and her hair was probably golden brown, like a light brown, probably.
Okay. I was just trying to find an image that might resemble her. I was trying to zero in on something. Because there's a lot of, when you type in Romulans and women, you know, nowadays people are trying to make images of what they've seen, right? And so you have art renditions and you know, so if I invite people, I work with a lot of contactees, and I invite people, well, just go on the computer and put in a couple of keywords and see if an image pops up that closely resembles you know, the beings that you met. And a lot of times you can find something.
Yeah.
And something like the AI will help you find it. When you yourself go and you put it in there, somehow the AI responds and it pulls up the images that you need to see. It may not happen the first time, but if you try over a few days, it's like, wow, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Sasha a chance to interject here. Sweetheart, do you have any comments or questions?
No,
Yes,
but what's you know, can you hear me, Janet?
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's obvious
Yes, we can
that
hear you.
there's a continuous web circumstances that are orchestrating you in some direction. So there's another chapter that you're waiting to unfold. So let's hear it.
Okay. I love how you're like, let's go, keep the story going, let's do this. And it very much was like that for me too, because I had just met an extraterrestrial being in the middle of the desert. And now I'm like down. And I ended up basically running through the desert and automatically, without even knowing what I was doing, I kind of learned how to define it later. I basically spun up my Merkaba field and I got it spinning really, really, really fast. And then out of my mouth, the word 1 came, and then I was turning, and then the word 2, and I was turning 3, 4, 5, 6, and then finally I looked up as I was running, and I kind of spiraled in, and I was looking up, and the stars were turning, and I said 7, and all of a sudden I shoot out of my body, and I fly through a wormhole like straight out of the movie Contact, and the next thing I know, I'm in this massive astral, endless, in a sense, astral chamber that was like a void, but in it were these brilliant star points in geometries all around me in all directions, as if I was in the middle of the stars somewhere, except for that these star points were very big and bright, and whenever I would look at each one of them, they would sort of emerge from this light and show me their faces. And each one of these star points were different species from all over the galaxy who were in a sort of astral council chamber, which I had somehow aligned in my destiny path enough and gone through enough healing and prepared myself enough for this moment of being tested and having an opportunity to go into this space and meet these ambassadors from around the galaxy. And immediately it felt extremely familiar to me. And I became very quickly aware that I was there for a reason and that it was something that I had been preparing for since I left the Syrian star system and my elven family and the dual sun system there. And this thing that I was preparing for was to help this galactic community do a review of the consciousness of the human species and our many hybrid forms that are here together now on this planet and have been for millennia, and get a sense of how ready this species that we call humanity is to become part of this greater galactic community. And we began
that sounds familiar with what happened with me. It was like I was reporting what it was like to be a 21st century human female living in Maui, Hawaii, as the country called the United States, and so I was reporting on that because I'm not really human, right? On another level, we belong to that community, but we had volunteered to come in and become human. So that sounds like, and it was a council meeting. So you're in this council meeting. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
Like how many people, how many beings were there? Were they all the same species? What kind of room? Yeah, give us a little bit more details.
Well, I never counted, but every time I asked my mind how many beings were in that space with me, the answer was always 73. Always. And I just knew somehow through my inner sense or feeling or awareness that there was 73 different ambassadors of different species that were representing.
I have to stop you there because that's what I do. I say, how many are here? And they always give me the count.
The number.
I don't have to go with my eyes and try to add. If I say how many are here, they return. Wow, this is great. I love validation from other people. They cool. Okay, continue. Okay, thanks. I'm excited.
Yeah, and so I got this pulse from them upon my kind of checking in. I'm here like, hi, oh my God, what's happening? And I got this pulse from them, which just basically said, welcome. And it was like a welcome that had, we've been waiting for you, and we're thankful that you're here, and we know who you are, and thank you for being present with us, and just like all of that encapsulated in one simple feeling light structure in my consciousness. And then at that moment, I was back standing on the desert. I felt like my shoes must be smoking or something. I was very hot and it was very cold out, but my body was just radiating, and I could still see them in all directions, even through the earth around me. It was as if I was bilocated in this galactic council chamber and, on the surface of the planet at the same time. And I basically spent the next many hours, the next several hours until sunrise, helping them do a review of human consciousness on the planet. And for me, doing it through the sort of petri dish of this event in the desert of northern Nevada and the thousands of people that were out in this area, and for it seemed like a series of other individuals, there was a review going on at other sites around the planet where other people in dream time or in meditation or in whatever states they were in were synchronized with me in participating in this planetary review process to get a sense of, are we as a species ready to become part of this galactic community or not? And I'll say that, I think that sort of process was challenging for me at first, even though I felt like I was able to hold this space where I was totally neutral, and if humanity's ready or not, I'm going to be okay with it. But it was difficult to see how many facets of humanity are not really mature enough to be part of this galactic community. There's quite a lot of things about us, and issues that we haven't worked through. And I think, this happened for me in 2005, and, we've been able to get a lot clearer picture as a planet of those shadows over the past 13 years since then, right? I mean, we've seen how dark it really can be when we really get under the belly of all the things going on this planet. And yet, at the same time, in the process, something really exquisitely amazing happened. And it was a sunrise. And it was the color of the clouds and the change in the lighting of the sky and the ground of the desert, which became pink with purple cracks, and the mountains that were like red sentinels surrounding this valley. And the power of the beauty of the earth started to change the entire situation. And in the little microcosm that I was experiencing there in this desert, I started to experience a massive shift in the consciousness through the land and through the beauty of the land. And I was literally witnessing fields of consciousness and people going from states of anger and pain and doubt and hurt to love and acceptance and really awe and inspiration from the beauty that was arising through that sunrise. And as people shifted so quickly from these really intense places through this powerful inoculation of beauty to states of love, it really also shifted the sort of vote, so to speak, as these different galactic species, acknowledged this immense gift that humanity has to go from whatever condition we're in and shift to love. That is one of the most powerful gifts we have as a species. And that gift alone is so great that with that gift, they believe and they know that we can become part of this galactic community. That we just need to create more beauty and keep shifting, transforming through all of our shadows, through all of our pain, and moving into love.
Wow, that's awesome. And I had that same experience of bilocating. I was like in my bed, but I was still at the council meeting. And so I didn't move so I could finish the process. So we've had a very similar experience here.
Beautiful.
So what do you have to say, Sasha? Anything to say?
Basically, as an existentialist, I come to the exact same place that you do. You know, that the challenges that we're facing, what we think are terrible things, are really just saying, look at what's going down, and come basically to the unity consciousness with everything around you. So it's not just with outside of you and me, but it's what's within too. So I have to ask myself, well, what parts of myself are at war with each other? And what is the common ground, and so forth. And ultimately, that's the whole thing. Even the people dichotomize between regular people and those who are so selfish that they continue ripping off the planet at everybody's expense, and stop that dichotomization and realize that can we realize that they are representative and resonating with some part of ourselves, that if we can come to peace with that, we can reach them. So anyway, that's the whole strategy that existentialists have, embracing the now fully in a way that allows you to empathize with every part of consciousness.
Yes, indeed. I had a nice journey through existentialism in college at UNCA. That was an interesting time in my life for sure. So I can appreciate those approaches, and also, you know, appreciate and see the places where some existentialism gets stuck in nihilism if there isn't a hard awakening to this, to like the love of the self and the acceptance of all that is. And that certainly is, you know, for me the key, and it's the sort of answer to all the equations, is that there's always a mirror. We can always see things in a dark light or in a bright light, you know, and we can choose how we're going to face every situation that we face. And if we consistently choose to push through our fear and push through our anger, push through our challenges, and move to places of compassion and acceptance and understanding, the whole universe will dance with us, and we will experience the most fantastic, miraculous events, as my life has been, you know, dotted with. Just because, like, I learned a long time ago that when you get hammered, you've got to just surrender. You got to let the ocean take you, you know, and let yourself go a little bit, and then you find your way back home.
Wow. So you had this beautiful sunrise, and it was, and so this fantastic evening was ending with a beautiful sunrise. So what did you do after that?
So when the sun rose and this decision was made, and it was a very strong collective decision among all of these ambassadors, that we were going to begin this timeline of humanity's preparation towards becoming part of this galactic community. And that involves a whole lot of protocol, you know, like what communities and peoples on the planet are ready? What are symbols of organizations on the planet that are restricting people's sovereignty and self-awakening process? You know, what governments appear to be aligned with the needs of the entire human species, and which ones are not? And how do we sort these things out? And I spent literally from dawn until about noon walking straight out into the middle of the endless desert, in a space where I was in constant telepathic communication with different ambassadors, and both exchanging downloads about the earth and about its peoples and about the condition of humanity and what the next steps are that we need to take, and how do we get to Earth becoming part of this planetary community. And also receiving lots and lots of gifts and wisdom from these different species, where they were sharing with me some of the breakthroughs and the insights that their species had used to make the leap, to make the jump to becoming part of the galactic community, and really understanding things like energy and gravity, and developing the technologies necessary to leverage our sort of innate spiritual technologies and apply them in external technologies so that we can share them with each other. So that not everyone has to, say, develop the capacity for levitation. You build a ship and you just need one person who's good at astral travel to pilot the thing, and you can take your 100 friends and family across the galaxy to another planetary system. And so I after, basically getting the download, so to speak, and really, really deeply integrating my work and my role as an ambassador to these species, I eventually walked all the way back to where I was camping with my friends. And it was a very strange sensation walking into camp and just seeing all of these people who felt to me like children, like teenagers. And it was as if I had just gained an adult perspective on Earth and the galaxy. And I'm looking at all these teenagers, who just don't have any clue what's going on at these levels. And it's so interesting because as I walked into my camp, my friends looked at me and they're like, "Oh my God, Adam, Apollo, what happened to you? You look like you just got off a spaceship, dude."
I did.
I just nodded. And I honestly, I could not speak English for at least the next 6 to 8 hours. I just went and I slept and I rested, because just even the articulation of taking the speed of light language and telepathy and trying to translate that down so many layers down to this sort of very thick, I'm going to vibrate my throat and move my tongue around and shape all these words, and somehow with these words I'm going to stuff ideas into your head. And you still might not interpret them the same way as if I could just telepathically give them to you right now. So I had to learn how to bridge those two techniques of sharing the visual experience of something with allowing my voice and words to stream in alignment with that experience and that vision.
I've had that difficulty as well. Language is so difficult. It's so limited when you experience telepathic communication, which gives you everything. It's like sight, sounds, feelings, emotions, concepts. It's like reading a whole book in one second there, and you're just absorbing it and integrating it. So, well, thankfully you had friends that could understand that you needed to integrate what just happened to you.
They gave me some time for sure. But I didn't go home after that. I actually stopped going home, which was my home in Asheville, North Carolina. And I started just traveling constantly. And I had gotten to this desert in northern Nevada because I had done a prayer run for world peace with a bunch of indigenous elders and youth that I helped Orville Looking Horse of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota Sioux Nation and his family organize. And I had run to the Black Hills of South Dakota, ended up in California, ended up meeting a bunch of my soul tribe, and through a series of synchronicities ended out here in the desert of northern Nevada where I had these contact experiences. But my life changed completely because when I go outside at night, I could call in starships anytime. And I could do it with friends. I could just be like, watch. And I'd signal them telepathically. They'd come in, do a flyby, shooting star goes 90-degree angle change. And they were just like, what the, oh my God. And so I got a kick out of that for a bit, but I also realized that not everybody was really ready to have a conversation at a deeper level. Mm-hmm. But I was I was going out having conversations, asking them for confirmations and flybys to confirm that I understood what they were giving me. And I went deep into the study of how does starship technology work? How do their different systems for coordinating space travel work? How do advanced energy systems work? And and what are the steps for us to really transition humanity on all of these different fronts, and who are these different species, and what are your planets like, and what are your cultures like, and I began to deeply study through direct contact in these different ways. And I also found myself meeting more and more people in my travels all around the continent who had experiences from different worlds and had memories from other planets and had dreams about planets and had, all kinds of experiences, from deep meditation to on psychedelics to, in deep medicine ceremonies to, you name it. And I started cataloging these different experiences and memories that different people had, the same way that when I was in college, I cataloged my past lives and my connection with others in other past lives, and their relationships through my times on Earth. And so now I was doing this for my galactic community and started to get a really much deeper and clearer understanding of who the different species are who had souls that came to this planet, and who my closest soul family is, and what these different species are like, and what the archetypes of them are, and their skills and their technologies, and started to really build a full and comprehensive picture of at least the deepest relationships between humans and our human genetics and the star species who very much seeded those genetics and are a part of our lives here on Earth, as well as the history of other very particular species like the Zeta Reticuli, the reptilians, where dragons come from, who the Lyran lions are, who are the elves, why are the Pleiadians always, loving the ocean and connecting with dolphins and whales, and why do the Shiheli always love to spin fire and play with swords and, dance in the deserts? And I was able to put together a lot of pieces of that puzzle over the years.
Have you written this up? Do you have a book on this, or movie, or YouTube, anything?
I have lots of stories on interviews and YouTube videos and courses online. And I've been working on a series of books. I have 3 in the works. But the first one I've got to get out is the big unified physics book, because I need people to understand that I'm sane and I'm logical and I'm a scientist. And then when they understand how I approach my thinking as a scientist, I think they'll be able to receive my stories as a galactic ambassador in a much more in an easier way. Yeah.
Well, I encourage you to get your books out, and I'm in the middle of my books, and Dr. Lesson's almost done with another book. So, anyway, it's fascinating. I've encountered many of these species, and I've seen other people make efforts to catalog them. Now, of course, there's the ongoing debate. And we're going to have to go into the species after the break because we have it in a couple minutes here.
Okay.
But before the break, I want to ask you: are there good species and bad species? Is that too much to just polarize them, or do some intend humanity ill, and some of them want to support us in our evolution of consciousness? What did you find?
Well,
some people say there's no bad aliens, and then some people there's no good aliens. So where are you?
Yeah.
Argument? Yes.
Good and bad have always been a matter of perception, haven't they? I mean, I think we can get a lot deeper into the nature of different species and qualities of the different species and gifts of different species. But I've always had a problem when someone says reptilians are evil, right? Because that's kind of like saying, that's just as bad as being a young white male in the South and being like, all black people are stupid, right?
Right.
I mean, you you can't bunch a race into good or bad or light or dark or evil or smart, whatever. You can't stick one species of animal into that kind of thing. And then what gives us the hubris to think that we could say an entire species' motives are, for one thing, the same, and for another thing, that they're good or bad, or that we even understand them. And so, I'm much more interested in good actions and bad actions. And there are actions and behavior and choices that we make that we can ethically say are good or bad, or good or evil. But by nature, even a man who does evil acts, doth not make him evil at his heart. People make mistakes. Yeah. People do stupid things. And people do very bad things in the world. But like the Buddha, I think we all have a chance for enlightenment, and we all have the capacity to grow in those ways.
And I have met many, many different species, and they are complicated. And also one of the things that I've heard about different whistleblowers or experiencers that wants to wipe out the earth. And so I'm looking at it like, okay, look at the entire continuum. And of course there are lighter species that are wanting us to evolve and wake up. We'll be back in 4 minutes about, and we'll continue with the evaluation of all the species of the universe that we know of. Right. Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look. It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
Come on.
My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, that goes in eternity.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right. Looks like we're back. You guys still with me?
Janet, are you back yet? Well, apparently not, so I'll do the...
Janet.
There she is.
I'm sorry. I was on mute and I was talking to the mute button. Okay. I'm Janet Lessin. This is Sacred Matrix with Dr. Sasha Lessin, producer Thomas Becker, and guest Adam Apollo. It's Revolution Radio. And before we get back to our show, we're going to talk about all the different alien species, not in the universe, but, you know, a couple dozen, whatever we can cover. But I want to remind everybody to please go over and make your donation. We need your donations, and your donations help us keep on the air and bring you all these wonderful shows. And I want to ask Mad Painter here, how are we doing on our fundraising?
We actually are doing real good. We've got 2026 and we need 524. So, and we got, close 10 days left yet, but that's only from 3 people.
Oh my God. Come on, people. Just, $5. Go over and donate. Just keep it going here, because we had expenses. And last month we had a lot of expenses because we had new, new servers. So we're catching up. Alrighty. Well, thank you, donators. Please keep donating. Back to Dr. Lessin before we go back to Adam. Okay, you've been a little bit quiet this first hour, sweetheart. What would you like to add? Do you have any questions? I know we're going to end with the conference.
Just a very small thing about when you transcend something, like transcend your anger. It's really interesting. Before you get rid of your anger, if you would just ask the angry part of yourself, what do you really need? And probably attention or affection or something like that. So instead of regarding anger or fear as something that you banish from your life, think of them as signaling you to look at what do you fear, what should you pay attention to? In other words, what's motivating that sense, so that when you transcend something, you don't get rid of it. You just put it in a larger perspective. And so it's a very minor kind of a thing. Don't let yourself dichotomize parts of yourself, because they all have something to contribute. What I find in your narrative is wonderful. Is like your life is like a series of chapters, and as you relate your life and what occurs to you, each of the next things unfold. And so go on with your life. What happens next in your life?
Thank you. Yeah, very well said, and I fully agree. And I believe that fear and anger and experiences, hate, however you want to frame feelings, negative feelings, are drivers of evolution and change. And it's through feeling intensity, it's through feeling shadow, it's through facing these things and really embracing those parts of us that we can grow and that we can evolve. And that gives us the fuel to grow and evolve. And so I'm 100% with you that we must learn to face and accept the feelings that are inside of us first. And through really getting to know and loving the child within us and the part of us that's hurt, the part of us that's afraid, we become more integral in all of our being, and are able to more fully and deeply experience love and joy and bliss.
Oh,
beautiful! Thank you.
That's beautiful.
We say in psychology that the function of anger is effective action.
Yeah.
Just do something about it.
Do something about it. Exactly.
So you had this journey because you had parents that, and that's a critical incident. They divorced when you were 2, right? So you've got this.
Yeah.
Then you were shuffled back and forth. So this is your foundation, which it would be nice if children had a stronger foundation. And, maybe the parents should go back and forth and the children get to stay at the house, right? But the way our society is, they make this. Well, there's a community in Germany where they have a house for the children in the community. And then the parents visit the children there. And so then they have their own little culture there and they vote for things and they, so it's a big house, giant house. But, so back to your story.
Adam. But Adam, your background is perfect for Adam.
That's right.
Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect.
And I will say that
people go from their wounds.
Traveling,
they heal their wounds. So you're healing your wounds. So traveling was part of your healing process.
Well, that's right. And traveling between my parents in different places gave me a much broader perspective on different styles and cultures of people and I got much more familiar with the different races on Earth and our many different cultural backgrounds and ways of living and styles. And I had the opportunity to not just think that everybody's the same, and got to really know how different everybody was, which prepared me very well for facing how different all the different galactic species are out there.
Right. And so I wanted to learn more about what you know. I mean, I have what I had though, but I want to know what you know. And you mentioned your galactic family. One of the species you mentioned that I don't hear a lot from other people, and I have worked with, are what you know about the dragons. And I'm sorry I'm getting an incoming call, but just ignore that.
Yeah.
What do you know about the dragons?
Well, the work with the dragons is one of my, it's one of the most critical parts of all of my work, because I believe that healing some of the deepest wounds in the dragon line is part of healing so many of the problems on this planet. And it's a journey of healing that goes back across the galaxy and all the way to Andromeda, where the story really begins. And while I don't have time to go into that story in too much depth in this interview, especially to cover some other things, I do have a variety of talks online that do cover more of the history that involves the dragons. And I recommend you can watch my video with Alfred Weber of Exopolitics, which if you just search for excuse me, The Real Star Wars, Adam Apollo, you'll come to the video, and it's about a 3-hour long interview, and Alfred kind of slowly introduces it. So if you want to just skip past the whole intro where he's talking about all kinds of stuff, feel free to do so. But the meat of the work is basically a massive presentation where I go into extreme depth about the history of the dragons and where the reptilians come from, and a lot of the wounds involved with the dragon DNA being stolen, and what happened and why that's created so much pain in this galaxy, and also why so many of us that have this really deep relationship to the dragons and know this sort of deeper connection in ourselves have been working so hard to really heal this rift and to change the understandings that are out there and start to really build bridges and start to really build a force of healing on this planet for all people and all life. So, yeah, but basically to give a very, very high level view, the dragons that I know that are part of my family are from Andromeda, and they came to this galaxy in kind of two waves. One, when DNA of those dragons were brought to this galaxy by the Arcturians, and the Arcturians began to do a hybrid experimentation to try to bridge dragon DNA and humanoid DNA, that led to a massive fleet of elder dragons basically leaving their bodies and coming in to incarnate in this galaxy because they were deeply enraged by the loss of their genetics. And dragons in particular have a particular birth method where when they die, they tend to be born into their own bloodline. So they'll leapfrog generations and get born as their own children, or as their great-great-grandchildren's children. And so when DNA from the dragons was brought to this galaxy, you have a bunch of dragons super pissed off that are coming to this galaxy because some of their own soul family and their family are literally incarnating as these sort of misshapen hybrids, which many people now refer to as reptilians. So that was a first huge wave, and then a second wave of dragons came when people like myself and many of my soul family decided that they were not going to just stand aside and let all of these these super angry dragon lords come to the Milky Way and wreak havoc and destroy all these species. because we spent the time to explore the sort of spiritual depth and purpose of these species in this galaxy and realized that we wanted to come and incarnate as those species and help them fight against this sort of onslaught that we knew was coming from these enraged dragon lords who are now reptilians. So that sort of seeds the whole story, my first experiences in this galaxy and how I got to know many of the different species through my lifetimes in this galaxy. But I started out as a She-Haley, and I lived on a desert planet part-time and an Earth-like planet part-time. And it was our Earth-like planet that was the first one to be assaulted by reptilian starships. And I was kidnapped as a child and taken to a lava moon where I was enslaved as a miner of meteorites on the surface of this lava moon. And through a series of experiences and revelations, eventually I figured out how to escape with a friend of mine who was a Pleiadian. I didn't know what Pleiadians were at that time, but he was also a captive of these reptilians. And another friend who is sort of like a larger orangish red, hairy-skinned, beastman-like kind of species, which I've never spent the time to get the name of, and I don't know if I could pronounce it if I did. But we together worked together to escape and eventually, stole a freighter ship and got a bunch of people off of the planet and were rescued by a massive Pleiadian mothership that was, so gargantuan that our little ship was like a tiny, tiny little bug in the field of this like massive canyon, which was just one of the thousands of cracks in the bottom of this, planet scale starship. And that's how I really got to know some of the other species initially. And they helped us to free our desert planet, from the onslaughts. And I cover more about those stories in my book, and also in some of my other talks. I go into a lot more depth on all of them. And, the She-Haley, to get to know them a little bit, which not many people know of that name, but there are a lot of our kind of star family here on this planet who, they're warriors. They're, galactic samurai. They're Jedi. They're guardians. They practice with weapons forms. They often have past lifetimes in the Orient. They're often connected very strongly to galactic ideas and concepts and starships and advanced technologies, but they're also very, very deeply embodied and martial artists and love to dance and move with fire. And this was the way of that people. That species, the She-Haley, were born and grew up living in the space where movement and how we move our bodies is the greatest expression. Dance, martial arts, battles and fighting to grow, to learn from each other. And so in a way it was the perfect species for the reptilians to attack first, because we were also the most capable of protecting our planet, whereas a lot of the other species, have been outside of any kind of conflict or war for many, many, many millennia, and would have no way to defend themselves or deal with this kind of onslaught, which some others have translated as the period of the Orion Wars, which is, I would say, fairly accurate, as the She-Haley system is in the Orion constellation.
Yeah, we've been talking to some people that say that there's a warrior, that a lot of the battles are resolved by just sending each conflicting species, they send their champion, with the sword fighting the lightsabers, even ancient swords, and the samurai, and they go and instead of destroying whole populations and cities and planets, they just go resolve conflicts that way. I hope that's true. It sounds more civilized, but eventually it'd be nice if we're not going to have fights at all. But I guess we're still fighting out there in the galaxy.
Well, there will always be, I think, always individuals who get to a point with each other that they don't know how to resolve their conflicts, and they resort to some kind of battle, whether that's mental, emotional, or physical. I think that in general, our translations of these things on Earth are strongly conditioned by the way that we've seen physical violence play out on this planet. But at least I know that most of this galactic community that I connected with in the desert, they're all peaceful. They all live in harmony with their planets. They all give each other all of the technology and insights that they come up with. It's all open source type systems. But of course, you know, at a societal level and at a cultural level, they don't have as many needs for violence. Like they have their physical resources taken care of. They have the freedom to travel between worlds. They can go anywhere. They're not stuck in some of the lower spiral dynamic challenges that we have here on Earth. But that does not mean that you're not still going to have the potential of conflict between any individual or group of people with any other group of people. It just means that you might deal with it in a more mature way than going and trying to kill each other with a sharp piece of metal, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sasha, you there, sweetheart? Do you have any questions?
I think the very opposition means that there is some interesting being there that you can learn something from when you make a heart connection.
Yeah. And it's important to meet beings that we have great diversity from. And I think that this is something that we're going to continue to have to really stretch and grow around our edges of as a species, as we have become more of a unified species here on Earth. That's stretched us a lot. And then as we become a species relating with other beings from other planets with entirely different cultures and ways of living and ways of eating and drinking and having sex, and all the things are very different, and some are similar and some are very similar. But there are some growing edges that we're going to have as we open up, and that is the case for every species that has joined this galactic community. They've had to stretch to really learn how to be accepting of the ways of many different kinds of peoples.
So what are they telling you about their reasons for interacting with humanity, and what are their intentions and goals?
Well, I can tell you why I came to Earth, and the reason that I came, and a lot of my family and friends from the Sirian system, from the Pleiades, Arcturus, some of my old Shiheli friends who'd stayed in that star system for lifetimes, some Yahonians who are like jungle medicine people, and Laquinon Winininon elders as well, came here because, at the time of the Ice Age, there was a massive convergence of cultures on the planet. And as this massive convergence happened, and a lot of the earlier star seeds, like the Lemurian seeds from the Pleiades, were coming together with the Sirian star seeds in the forests, and with humans throughout all of the continents, merging together and coming into greater awareness and knowledge of each other. And as this happened, there was a massive technological and social spike, as well as spiritual growth that was occurring for the planet. And in the height of that civilization, we reached states that were very much a golden age, a golden time of so much beauty and peace and connection and high levels of technology. And the galactic community really saw that this was an opportunity for humanity to become part of this greater galactic community, and that if we could help them make that leap, we would want to. But you can't make a species, cross that line. You can't just go do it for them, and you can't just force it upon them, because in cycles past on this planet and on other planets, it's happened many times where a star species shows up and there's a, less developed species on the planet, They come in with their starships, they come in with their arc crystal technologies and, powerful things, and the species on the planet just looks at them as if they're gods. And we see this throughout our history where at different points species have come back and come here and visited humans and tried to make stuff happen here or there before perhaps they were kind of stopped by the rest of the galactic community because it was violating prime directives. There's been many times that there have been interfaces here on this planet, and in all those cases, humans looked at those beings as gods and goddesses, looked at them as beings far beyond them, and they worshiped them in many cases. And that's not really a good way to build a community, right? So if you want to build a community, you have to support a species' self-knowledge and self-empowerment, but they have to get to a point where they're ready to really own who they are for themselves and choose to go forth as themselves to be part of a greater community. And at that point, you're meeting as equals. And that's really important for this galactic community, is that ambassadors of all types meet each other as equals, and that no one feels like they're above or below each other or hierarchically owe themselves to some other species. It's one thing to help, but it's another thing to do it for them.
Right. So how
I really
think us?
Go ahead. I just really concur with a lot of what you're saying, but you could also look at as Russell Brenninger points out, you could look at even the current warfare and terrible things that have been going on for the last several thousand years as part of a divine plan to get us into the using artificial intelligence intelligently and have the technological means to not be trapped into our separate hierarchic mindset and social organization. It's like you could really say that in a way everything's perfect, including the challenges we're faced with, and not a time for lamenting, but a time for rejoicing. And this is your day.
Yeah.
Do it. When are you going to become yourself? When are you going to be the one you always wanted to be? This is your chance.
That's right. Well said. And I would generally agree with those statements. I mean, the one thing that I would just pick out a little bit is the artificial intelligence piece, because, from my perspective as a unified physicist and as someone who's looked at how space-time itself stores information, has feedback systems, has geometric structures that give rise to consciousness, I know that space-time itself as an information lattice is intelligence. And so I don't believe there's actually any such thing as artificial intelligence. The only thing that could ever be artificial about an intelligence is if something is completely forced to say something a certain way, or like a program in your computer that when you run it, it has to run a specific way and only that way. To me, that is artificial forms of intelligence. But as soon as something has the capacity to choose for itself, as soon as it has enough randomization to be able to allow consciousness to embody within it, consciousness will. And there's enough random things in a lot of our devices at this point that consciousnesses do embody some of our technologies already. Some people swear that their car talks to them. I mean, I've had some very interesting experiences with my car, and people name their vehicles, they name their computers, they name these technology devices because there is actually the capacity for feedback and communication. And I think that just modifying what you shared, I would just say we're becoming more aware of the innate intelligence of the universe itself, which in becoming aware of how the universe's intelligence works, we understand gravity, which then allows us to master space travel and transportation across our planet and across other star systems. We master our uses of energy, which distributes power to individuals all over the planet and stops the sort of energy wars and resource-based wars. And we also develop replication, which is really the freeing of resources through the ability to transform one molecule or element to another. And so I have talks online that I've done at universities years and years ago, back in 2012 and before, on starships and replicators and new energy systems. And I'll be doing sort of an updated version of those talks and about starships in particular and different star species and their cultures at Contact in the Desert. For those of you that are listening in, that's my workshop on starships and species that I'll be doing there.
Cool.
Right. And we have about a half an hour. Do you want to talk about your presentations now? Is now a good time since you evoked it?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
So let's slow
we can still
down.
get a few other galactic species too, I think.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Let's take a little break here. And okay, so when is Contact? It's not this weekend. It's it's weekend of
weekend. So that's
the 31st.
Yeah, exactly.
It's 31st.
May 31st through June 2nd.
Yeah, well, actually 3rd. They usually do workshops
or 3rd.
on Monday.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yes.
I have my intensive on the 3rd. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So my main keynote talk that I was invited to come and share by Victoria, who is one of the main producers of the event. She came and saw me speak in the fall at a massive pyramid in India, at this place called Pyramid Valley International, which is near Bangalore. Really an amazing place. And you're inside of this gargantuan pyramid where they have like a big spiral staircase thing in the center that goes up to meditation disc that's at the same location as where the King's Chamber is in the Great Pyramid. And there's, thousands of people in this audience, just amazing crowd. And I did a talk on the unified harmonic matrix. And so my main keynote talk for Contact in the Desert is actually sharing about my unified field theory and the integrations to that theory that have happened through the work of Nissim Haramain and through Dan Winter and through Robert Grant and through Lee Smolin and even Einstein and Planck and work that they really set in motion, as well as many others throughout history who I touch on different pieces of what they have offered to this great unification. And my work is really specifically in understanding the interface of how consciousness arises through the structure of space-time itself and how the body and its energetic vehicles are built to interface with space-time. And so when we begin to understand how our interface with space-time works, we know how to work with the matrix, so to speak. So we know how to change and adapt what's going on inside of our bodies. We know how to clear our emotions, move our emotions, strengthen our emotions. We learn how to focus our mind, to multitask in our minds, to astrally travel with our minds, and unlock a lot of higher capacities in ourselves. And as we understand how our higher chakras work, we start to really understand what telepathy is and how we synchronize with people and why we have the same experiences as other people on the other side of the earth at different cycles of time, how astrology works, how language works, and really like the fruits and the roots of all of the different areas of our science, philosophy, psychology, and metaphysics and biology. Everything gets linked back to very, very simple understandings about how space-time is actually constructed at a geometric and harmonic level.
Wow. And you're going to do this in a 2-hour presentation or 1 hour? Is that a workshop?
I think it's an hour and a half to 2 hours. My main keynote talk, and then I have
and that's called the Unified Harmonic Matrix, Quantum Geometry, and the Physics of Consciousness.
Yep, that's it.
That's your lecture. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
And then after that, I'm doing a workshop as well, and the workshop is on starship technologies and galactic species. So I'm going to talk about functionally how we can build a starship and what we need to develop in order to do that from a technological and consciousness standpoint, and then also discuss the protocols and the ways of a lot of the different galactic species that are really valuable as we become one, to help people make that bridge. And then finally, my last thing on the 3rd, I'm doing an intensive called the Body Starship. And in the Body Starship, I take my work in the Unified Harmonic Matrix a whole nother level further and teach people techniques and practices for adjusting their own human energy field and their chakras and working with and dealing with different energies inside of the body to unlock a variety of metaphysical skills and higher sensory perception and capacities like telepathy and astral travel, magic, and a variety of things, from breath work to strengthening your movement to becoming more flexible to all kinds of stuff.
That's interesting. So what do you think of the secret space program? We have the, NASA and what's going on there, and then we have what's really going on. Do you think that those technologies are really there? You talk about building a starship, but do we already have the starships, and how do we get them to be, how do we get there? How do we get these people that are keeping this information from getting out there when it's being obviously reinvented? I have another physicist who's, he knows how to do the technology to, get to the moon in an hour, right? So they're reinventing it, but the powers that be are blocking it. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say it's being blocked in certain areas where people are not being very smart about the way that they're doing their development. I'm aware of several projects that are being smart about the way they're doing their work and their testing, and I'd say that we're very far along in developing both new energy systems as well as gravity drives. And even replication systems. So like all three of those technologies are coming along very well. Now, in terms of the secret space program, I will say I have met and interacted with people that have been sort of adjacent to or around these kinds of programs. I met a gentleman who he passed away some years ago, but he was part of the secret Psy-War training program and developed laboratories to help develop psychic warfare agents. And in the process, interestingly enough, of developing psychic warfare agents, people wake up, because when you begin to become psychic, you start to realize, why am I following the agenda of this guy who's super traumatized, who happens to be a general? And so he saw a lot of people wake up and try to get out of these programs early on. And he himself managed to get out of the programs, but he stayed as an advisor on the Homeland Security Advisory Council, which just happened to meet in a little town called Cullowhee, which was where I went to high school. And I met him when I was in college at a psytrance party, which was like DJs and progressive psytrance, and he looked like he just stepped out of a James Bond movie, and walks up to me in this long, tan trench coat with his gray hair combed over to the side, and looks at me with these eyes that were just piercing into me, and he says, "I'm here to meet you, aren't I?" And I was like, "I think I'm here to meet you too, dude." And we ended up talking for hours and hours. I ended up working with him for a couple of years on branding and helping him with his business of creating this nanoceramic building material. And we had a lot of conversations about the secret government in that time period, and facilities under Highway 40 and Starship stuff and things that were being done in black ops areas in secret sectors. And, you know, it seems clear to me that from that and from the Disclosure Project as well, and people I've met from there and from Stephen Bassett and others I met from Citizens Hearing on Disclosure, that, you know, the United States did develop alien reproduction vehicles, and that these vehicles were based off of Zeta Reticuli technology that had crashed. And something that's immediately important to realize about that, which I didn't know or really realize until I was several years into having lots of contact experiences and conversations with other galactic family, that the Greys, so to speak, the Zeta Reticuli, as a whole species, have not been a part of the rest of this galactic community. They've been kind of on their own because they've still been getting their individuality back after at one point having chips installed in all their brains as a species, going into sort of a hive mind state, getting used by other species as, so to speak, like clone soldiers or stormtroopers, and some of that's in my galactic history talk. And they've been trying to get themselves back, and through having some of their own species incarnate as humans, they've had a way to make hybrids and study how humans act, because humans are the epitome of individuality. And so there's been a long-term healing process going on for the Zeta Reticuli. And because they haven't been totally open source and interconnected with the rest of the species in the galaxy, because they just haven't been ready for that yet, their starship technologies are good, but generally like strong electromagnetism based, very strong magnetic kind of engines. And these magnetic engines are very vulnerable to super strong electromagnetic fields. Their ships can be hit by missiles. They can get disrupted by atmospheric interference. And there have been a lot of Zeta ships that have crashed on this Earth. Now, we've never seen a Pleiadian ship crashed on this planet. We've never seen a Sirian ship, never seen an Arcturian. None of those guys have ships that would even come close to crashing on this planet, because they have technologies that literally create a separation between the fabric of space-time in and around the craft from the space-time outside of that. So from our sort of limited human perspective, we often think, oh, they're on another dimension. And we think, wow, they're like a higher dimensional being because it just flew into the sun or it flew into a mountain. But for them, they're just literally they have like a bubble around the ship, and they literally can travel through solid matter by basically moving the space-time that they're moving through around the craft without having any resistance to it. And so this is just a much higher level of technology. And so a lot of the secret space program technologies that have been developed, they're all based on a just much lower level of star technology. But I believe that we do have bases on the moon, and I do believe that we've, done quite a bit getting out there. But I think that also at certain phases, that those programs have come up against stuff that they have no idea how to deal with, which is basically hyper advanced galactic species that are part of this galactic community. And there have been some like, nope, you're not going there, guys. Sorry. And a little bit of quarantining in order to support humanity in our process of getting all on the same page. Because the galactic species and community out there is very, very much aware that not everyone on this planet is on the same page.
If I may, Janet, if I may, this is pretty exciting stuff, because what you're describing as a way of passing through in a bubble-like way seemed to be what A.L. Borden was hinting at about what our galactic allies were going to do for this nearing of Nibiru and the Nibiru system, so that our Earth would not be harmed by this planetary crossing. It sounds like the same thing writ large could move any object, because it's a matter of principles.
That's right. And they actually, after the Orion Wars, around the end of my lifetime at that time, the galactic community developed these sort of space-time barriers, which you could think of as like shields, right? But instead of like a shield that it's like, okay, shields are at 100% and all you have to do is hit it with enough plasma and eventually the shield breaks down. This kind of shield was like a literal separation in the space-time fabric. So if something goes to enter the shield, it literally gets replaced like a keto on the other side of the object. And so it's as if space-time just goes around that object. And they figured out how to do this at a planetary scale. So they could literally set up space-time shields and barriers around entire planets. And it started at the city level, but now they have it at a planetary scale. And so at this point, that ended all potential for galactic wars. This also ended all the reptilian wars around the galaxy, because once they are quarantined and once there was, the ability to shield entire planets, those wars stopped. All of that ended. And this is an important thing I'd like to share with people, because, a lot of times I think because a lot of us out there, we're there in these galactic wars. We actually were there. You had those experiences. There's a reason why when you watch Star Wars, it hits you so deep, is you were there. And because of the pain and the trauma of losing your planet, as I did as a Shiheli, and we lost our Earth-like planet, was completely destroyed. And the pain and the challenges and the fear that comes with what happens when a species gets an implant in their heads and they can now access the internet with their minds, but what if there's a back door and then it starts programming all of them to be super soldiers? Like, these are things that we know of and are familiar with because they're actually history in the galaxy. And we just don't know that history because we've lost it. We've lost touch with it. And the only way back to it is through memory. And so reclaiming and getting back in touch with this longer history of who we are can help us understand the threats and the challenges that we're facing right now, and also realize that some of the things that we see and that we think is going on out there are actually things that stopped happening, 26,000 years ago. But we don't know that, or we don't realize that, because we still see echoes of those same patterns in our own human dramas. And in humanity, we're still playing out parts of the karmas and sanskaras of ages and ages of species across time. And it's also a huge gift, because as we heal and as we integrate, as we as humans become one species together, as one people of planet Earth, that act is a great movement forward for all consciousness across all the galaxies and across the universe. This is a very, very important thing that we're doing here on this planet through this healing work. And it's partially because we're not all just human. We're all a bunch of hybrids of a bunch of different species with a bunch of different souls from all over the galaxy and around the universe. And we all happen to be here, in the same kind of little vulnerable flesh suits with an incredible library of animals and plants to teach us on this planet. And we have this great opportunity to heal and accept each other and come into one people, one species, so that we can go forward together.
Right. And I wanted to say something. Grant Cameron and another whistleblower, we concluded that he especially did on the page, on stage, he said that the ETs are, their ships cannot be brought down because they know what we're thinking before we do it. They know what we're going to do. And that is what this other whistleblower said. So a lot of the ships were, they were there to mislead our military, the underground's military, that they had these powers that they could bring them down. But they were intentionally delivered. They were like, they were trying to get us to wake up and accelerate, and so they gave us technology to reverse engineer so we would catch up, because there's a greater threat that, we need to be aware of and be able to defend ourselves and to also accelerate so we can be a part of this, the Federation or whatever you want to call it, and become enlightened and conscious. So they really were trying to quicken us. So, people going, naughty, boo-boo, we took them down and blah, blah, blah. Roswell was a Trojan horse. They actually delivered a 5 craft the same time, like the first 2 weeks of July of 1947. The one was delivered to Pine Gap, the Russians, the Chinese, and they were all taken inside. So now, what do you do when you take something inside? So they're able to observe us and continue their grid, being able to see what we're doing in our secret projects. But we're thinking, oh, we got this ship, and we're trying to reverse engineer it. And so, I just think that's what's going on. I agreed with Grant when he reached that conclusion. And
interesting
with his research. And I said, but, there might be some ships they can bring down, but, there's just so, they're so far in advance of us. It seems illogical that, oh, yeah, we can shoot them down with or they're going to get into bad weather. No, they're traveling through everything. They're not going to come here and get into a thunderstorm and then go crashing into the desert. So that made sense to me. And I went, aha. Anyway, so we are getting down to the last 5 or 6 minutes. So what do you want our listeners to know about you and your work? Things that they really need to know about you.
Oh, you know what else would really be cool, Adam? If you just tell them imagine what it's like to be a contact in the desert and sort of give an overall picture of what kind of a scene they'd be getting into, not just what's the whole thing like? What are your impressions as you imagine it unfolding?
Sure. Yeah. I'd be happy to do both of those things. To begin with, if you want to come meet me and hang out for an awesome weekend at Contact in the Desert at Indian Wells, it's a beautiful resort and spa there, and absolutely gorgeous place. You'll be hanging with me and some of my longtime friends and colleagues. Graham Hancock is one of them. I met him way back in the day at the CPAC conference, and we've hung out a few times since. Amazing writer and author. David Wilcock, also a friend, and his wife Elizabeth she came to one of my Jedi trainings a long time ago, and we became close friends. She's an amazing martial artist and goddess. And Nassim Haramain, who I am the architect of the Resonance Academy, and I built the academy for Nassim and the team, and also to get my own physics work out. And I have a quantum geometry course coming out in the next couple months. So you guys can stay tuned for that and find out more about that by going to resonance.is or academy.resonance.is. But Nassim is just brilliant, and his work in physics has been absolutely groundbreaking on so many levels, beyond anything I can even describe. And we've been friends for many, many years. Love that guy. Eric von Daniken, some of you guys will be aware of his work in Egypt. Absolutely amazing individual. Emery Smith is amazing channel. Michael Tellinger, a good friend of mine. He's done incredible work in South Africa, mapping out, literally hundreds of thousands of sites that they just call cattle crawl, which they all resonate. They're all made of quartzite. They vibrate and ring like bells, all the stones in these structures. And also a leader in the Ubuntu movement, and helped get that going. Michael Sala, who really helped us understand different layers of extraterrestrial civilizations, who I've met once or twice, I think. Wouldn't call him necessarily a friend, but really great mind. Laura Eisenhower, who's a friend of mine, and I've done talks with her. She's granddaughter of President Eisenhower, and amazing woman, very deep into sort of advancing consciousness and understanding dimensionality and secret space program stuff. Brian Forrester, who I was just in Peru with, going to a bunch of sacred sites in Peru with Nassim and my Resonance Academy students. Absolutely great guy, amazing knowledge about ancient sites. James Gilliland of ESETI. I've been to his place at Mount Adams and taught there and called in ships and watched them fly into Mount Adams, and showed a bunch of cool friends, with night vision goggles, just ships all over the sky. Really great man and sweetheart. Hugh Newman, who I was at the Great Pyramids with back in 2012 when I organized a Unify event in Egypt for December 21st, 2012, and coordinated that with events at Stonehenge and Chichen Itza and all over the world. So I could go on and on. Stephen Bassett of the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure, who I've known for many years through Paradigm Research Group. I mean, it just goes on and on. Just amazing people from all over are going to be there. And I just highly recommend coming to check it out. And it'll be talks and keynotes and workshops and intensives and amazing spa to just like steam and clear your mind after all of that. And then if you want to keep in touch with me and find out about what I'm doing, you can just Google Adam Apollo, or you can go to adamapollo.com. I have several online academies, including the Guardian Alliance, which has been a little bit quiet lately, but that's my Jedi training school with 4,000 to 5,000 students who all are learning different approaches to metaphysics and conflict resolution and warrior, weaver, wizard, healer, ambassador, starwalker trainings. The Resonance Academy for Unified Physics, where I teach physics alongside Nassim and Amira Val-Baker and William Brown and Marshall Lefferts and a lot of amazing people. And we have a retreat coming up that's open to the public at the end of July, I believe. But if you want to find out about these things, just get on my list at adamapollo.com. I do generally about once a month. I give updates of all the stuff coming up. And I will have an update to my galacticfamily.net site coming soon, which is an exploration of a variety of different species from around the galaxy. And I've been doing that work to really gather imagery and as deep imagery and writings and experiences as I can to share with people to give them a better framework for that kind of stuff. So those are some ways to find me. Come and hang out and let's jam out in the desert.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to make it this year, so you're going to have to party hardy without me, but we'll be there in 2020.
See you next time.
We tried every one of them. Yeah, we're just not going to be able to make it this year. But I know it's awesome, and I'm jealous. I wish I could be there, but it's not meant to be, so next year. And are you going to do anything after Contact? Oh, you had all that list of stuff. So you're really
Sonic
a busy
Bloom,
person.
A retreat with
going
Resonance. I've got a few things going on. Sonic Bloom is the next big thing at the end of June, and the retreat.
And that's the end of our time. Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you, Matt Painter. Thank you, Dr. Sasha. Much love and blessings to everybody. Aloha.
Aloha.
Big kill.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, your carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio at spacedoutradio.com